Hey, it's Nick Vial, host of the Vial Files, and I'm here to remind you to check out our show. Do you like reality TV? Are you interested in pop culture? Are you fascinated with relationships? Or are you struggling in your own relationship? Well, there's something for everyone here at the Vial Files. Whether it's Ask Nick on Monday, our reality recap episodes that break down your favorite reality TV and pop culture moments, or our Going Deeper episodes that give you the blockbuster interviews with some of your favorite celebrities out there. Either way, we have something for everyone, so check out the Vial Files wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Edmondson, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Anthony Ames, Sarah's husband, a.k.a. Nippy.
And we're here to talk about things that are a little bit culty. Speaking of, we were in a cult, and we woke up, thank goodness, and we have a lot to say.
And a lot to ask.
This podcast is going to be a deep dive into everything from the red flags to the narcissism, the manipulation, the resiliency, the recovery process, and everything in between. Also, we want to share some of the good we got out of it so you can get all the nuggets without having to join a cult.
If you haven't already, because there are a lot of things out there that are just a little bit culty.
Welcome to A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about the fads, beliefs, and trends that blur the line between healthy and a little bit culty. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And find us on Instagram if you have any suggestions for things you have found to be a little bit culty.
Under the surface, the water fills my lungs. This ground I worship has swallowed up its young. And you give for a promise I can't keep.
Hey, everybody. This is really exciting and totally spontaneous, but this is a bonus summer episode.
Bonus summer episode with India Oxenberg.
We're in Atlanta. We're here for our family trip. And most of you know, yesterday was Allison Mack's sentencing. And we've been in touch with India since this all went down and hoping that she'd be a guest one day. And she actually reached out and said this would be a good time to process. And truthfully, this is one of my more emotional episodes and meaningful, just insofar as we just got to shoot the shit and talk about a lot of stuff.
Yep. It's great to see her smile. And let's just roll right into it. Thanks for being here, India.
Thank you.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
I am so happy you're here because I know everyone in our listenership has been like, when are you going to talk to India? And I'm like, maybe one day down the road, like if and when she's ready, we'll see. And now it's just a spontaneous thing that you're doing our bonus summer episode. And I mean, I haven't seen you.
Perfect timing, actually.
I haven't seen you in over 4 years. I haven't seen you in person in over 4 years. And to see your beautiful, shining face out and free, I'm going to cry because this is like so good, you know?
This is our objective.
This was the objective.
Just a little caveat. There was a pandemic.
No, I don't even have tissues ready. What was I thinking?
Shit. You should know this by now.
you.
Tissues.
Use your
notepad.
bedcloth. Use your bedcloth.
It's covered with Beans and Rice's hair because apparently it's actually their bed, not mine.
Oh.
But thank you so much for having me, guys. This was very spontaneous, but also something that I had thought about for a while and have really been wanting to do. But I was really kind of waiting until I felt ready. And with this whole crazy month and with Allison's sentencing yesterday, I didn't know how I was going to feel, but I did know that there was going to be some sense of closure. And I thought that this would just be a wonderful opportunity for us to just connect and talk.
Yeah.
Overdue.
Way overdue.
Very.
And I was reflecting on our friendship and how, like, you know, when we met, I just always really loved you and thought you were so cool. And I loved that you made gluten-free baked goods, which of course is the key to my heart. And, you know, and then when you're in the ranks of NXIVM, it's like, there's just all this bullshit and like separation. And it really messes up friendships. And then of course we left and we didn't speak. And then we were very much, you know, not friends for a while because we were on different camps.
Well, I never felt that.
Well, no, I mean, I didn't feel that about you, but I'm sure you. Well, I have questions. For
I
you
felt
about
like
that.
you're my little sister, and I had to go help you.
Yes,
That's kind of how I felt.
but I knew that you were hearing things about us. So,
Oh my
yes.
God, was I ever? I mean, we didn't hear the the end of it. It was nonstop propaganda about, those who have left, those who are speaking out against Nexium and DOS. And it's like, they didn't stop. I mean, and that was kind of one of the more difficult things is being on the inside and having to kind of comply with all of the bullshit that they were saying, and also being too afraid to question for myself while I was still in there, because it just wasn't safe. It wasn't okay. I was seeing what was going on with the people who had left, and they were being targeted, like you and Mark and Bonnie and Nippy, and not like targeted like they were going to come after you with a knife or anything like that. It wasn't like it wasn't like I ever felt that the threats were going to become physical, but the fear was really real. And so I think that's something that's difficult for people to understand, is that you're not sort of chained down in a room, unable to leave. The emotional restrictions are even more damaging in some ways. It's like because it's more difficult to comprehend for yourself. It's like, why do I feel like I can't leave? I mean, I remember a lot of moments, even pre-DOS, where I felt like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't want to be here. And they would tell me so many times, like, you have one foot in and one foot out, and you really need to commit to your growth and all of this stuff. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Why do I really feel like I don't want to do this, but I'm still here?
Right.
Yeah. Well, you're just not integrated enough.
Yeah. I mean, well, that would be the exact thing that you would hear. You would get trapped in a closet by Esther Carlson being told that you need to take 18 more Jeunesse tracks. And
for $15,000.
Right. For $15,000 that I don't have, and wasn't making any money while I was.
No, but India, you can make $12 an hour working for the company, and then you can pay it off over 25 years.
And your lifeblood. But I was wondering that, for you guys, and I mean, I assume that it was similar to me, that there are probably so many moments where you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I so committed to this? But I also am not going anywhere with my life, but I'm tricking myself into thinking that I'm actually getting somewhere where I'm not moving forward at all.
Well, I mean, you nail it. I think it's case by case too. For me, and I remember making decisions along the way. Nope, not doing that. Nope, not doing that. And that, I think, that's where you begin and the company begins, if that makes sense. And it felt like a company, and there were certain things. And I told people never move to Albany.
We told people that.
Yeah.
If you had asked me, I would have told you not to. And I would have said, don't tell anyone I told you that.
I wish that it was that simple. But at the time that I was moving to Albany, it was not my choice. That was a total instruction.
Oh, I know.
That came from Keith through Allison.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous to do it because, one, it meant that I was going to have to break up with my then boyfriend. Two, I was going to have to leave I'm doing air quotes here, but the company that I was so invested in, which was Rainbow. And I knew that I was going to have to give up everything that I had in Los Angeles to redirect my life to Albany. I was really afraid, but I didn't have a choice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I was already in DOS, and then I was instructed to relocate and live with Allison. So I didn't want to move to Albany. I had to kind of convince myself that moving to Albany was the right thing for me.
Right.
But that was also because I couldn't tell anybody the real reason why I was having to move. I was just like, oh, I'm really, really focused on my growth. See ya. Bye, everybody.
People
which
have
is
a
great
hard
for
time
relationships.
understanding that abuse of power.
Yeah. Or
They
why
really
you
do.
would choose that. Like, well, you could say no. Like, well, not really. Not when you have that much collateral on the line.
No, and that's and that's actually one of the more frustrating things that I've heard before. And they're like, well, I would have just said no. I'm like, oh yeah, let's see.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That I'm sure you and I face similar frustrations when it comes to people understanding what we've been through, even though we went in slightly different paths and underwent different types of abuse. Similar process. And you get it. And that's why I was so happy, not only when you got out, but when you decided to speak about it, because I felt very alone there for a while.
I bet you did.
So I'm
I had
sorry.
your back. I had your back.
Yeah, Nippy has had your back. I don't know if you know this, but like in our war room meetings with your mom and the team, Nippy was just like, he really did see you as a little sister that had been left behind and was like, I'm gonna go and and like we're gonna have a bus or like a tank.
There was a moment where your mom
God,
looks at me.
I wish.
Your mom looks at me, right? And she's like, I think we should just go there. And I look at her, I go, listen, I'll go and,
throw her over my shoulder.
and
That's what you
she's
said.
like, Nippy, I'll pay for your flight. We'll go there. And the plan was everything I was on board with. But then I was like, okay, I get to the door. Do I have to grab India and throw over my shoulder and put her in a van? And then like, am I going to have to kick someone else's ass in the process? Like,
You have Claire calling saying,
and then-
accuse them of kidnapping and make sure that you have a restraining order. Like,
well, I was
there's
game.
No recourse.
Listen,
It
I was
wasn't gonna
game.
work.
I was game. I was down for, because I got to tell you, if it didn't get to, and by the way, how quickly did law enforcement move on this? It was pretty impressive. But if it wasn't going to
we
go
got
that
lucky
way,
compared to
we
other
did.
people.
We did. If it didn't go that way, I had plans that I wasn't sharing with other people, but it involved a baseball bat and waiting outside that house.
For Keith, not you, just so you know. Just to be clear.
No, yeah.
I got that.
And- yeah. I don't think you have to clear that up. I think your mom would have been in the car being like, all right, Nippy, here's what we're going to do. And I'm like, look, you just point me in the right direction, Catherine. So that's where I was in this whole thing.
And I appreciate that. And I mean, I've had my father say similar things too. And the reality of it was that probably just would not have worked. And that's
No, it
kind
wouldn't
of
have. Ultimately,
and it's scary to think that, but it wouldn't.
It wouldn't. And ultimately, if you're handling your problems with violence in that capacity, you open up a whole different set of other
you
problems.
fall into the trap that they probably wanted you to fall into,
Yeah.
which was to make another mistake so that they could get a win.
Well, our commitment is our power. I would have committed to that if it had come to that.
Is that one thing you're taking from SOP? Commitment is your power, babe?
I didn't need to take that. I had that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
There's a book, India, called Power versus Force.
Yeah. Most of the tech.
really?
It's insane. When you read it,
I say tech in air
Power
quotes also.
versus- Right.
it's by
The
David
tech.
Hawkins, and just read it. You're going to,
Well,
even the
Power versus
examples.
force.
Yeah,
Wow.
even the
He's such a-
examples.
He's such a plagiarist.
I know. And someone even said, "Oh yeah, I'm sure Keith probably read every book." I'm like, no, he didn't. He read probably every cliff note and then had
Yep.
some intelligent woman read it for him and give
Mhm.
him the synopsis, and then he would steal it and create a curriculum.
Yeah.
But
One of the women from XOSO told me that he literally gave them books and they would highlight passages and then give it back to him, and he would use that to make the XOSO curriculum, which, by the way, that I hated. I hated XOSO. I'm like, why can't I do yoga?
I also hated Jeanette.
Yeah. I liked it at first, I'm going to say. I did like it at first, and then it took a steep turn.
Well, it has good conversations at first. Past
Yeah.
that,
Well,
it
yeah,
just-
and you're like kind of shooting the shit to a certain extent.
yeah, exactly.
But
That's what it was.
and that kind of feels nice. But then other than that, I was like, do I really have to do this? And then I actually, as long as I could get away with it, I didn't pay for it. Like I
Oh,
didn't.
yeah.
I would change my credit cards. I would lose it. I would like re-enroll with the wrong credit card. Like all these random loopholes because for some reason I like refused to pay for the ongoing group.
I know, $50 a month
And-
for
It's
nothing.
a lot.
It's
and
a
you
lot.
knew admin wouldn't get
Well,
that right. It'd take them a
no,
year to figure that
exactly.
out.
I'm going to throw in a what chaps my ass right here because you know what? For a success program, I say that in air quotes, their admin was so bad. Like, could they get someone who knows how to process an application and charge a credit card? No.
It was pretty haphazard and it was easy to kind of like go over there and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I definitely put in the wrong credit card for that one. Whoops. I'll get back to you.
You know, someone's going to listen to this and go, I knew it. I knew
I
India
know.
wasn't paying for Janess.
I know.
She's the parasite.
I mean, I definitely paid for my fair share of other things.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I
Ditto.
didn't, I like, that was one of my ways of kind of like asserting myself.
Mm-hmm. My way of asserting myself with Janess was I just stopped going. Like during especially the long trainings, I'd have an excuse if I had to go, like Nippy would go pick up Troy and I'd
I
be
was
like,
fighting to pick up Troy.
I'd be like, I'll go pick up Troy. And I'll be like, I need to make some enrollment cards. I really need to fill the next training. And then I'd like step outside and do laps around.
We'd go for a walk.
Go for a walk and do work because I just couldn't sit there and talk about the same thing for 4
for
hours.
45 minutes, 4 rounds.
And then
Yeah.
you just start to glaze
I
over.
finally went to sleep underneath the industrial tables.
He'd be sleeping under those tables. What do you have a chaps my ass about Janess? You can do multiples. You can do as
Okay.
many as you want because you're a special
All right,
guest.
thanks. Let's see. What chaps my ass about Jeunesse is all the butchered feminism. I mean, like, that is just next level, because really we're just regurgitating all this misogyny.
Right.
Mhm.
And like, it took me a while to really see it for what it was. But when I did, I was like, holy shit, how did I believe that?
Mhm.
Like, that's such bullshit.
I think kind of, crazy brilliant. I say brilliant again loosely, but how he was making it look like, let's look at our indoctrination. Let's look at our indoctrination so we can evolve it. Meanwhile, he was slipping in all this indoctrination that was so toxic. I still have thoughts about women that are like, that is not my belief. You
Me
too?
Yep. And I have to do exactly what you say. I have to like call it out and stop it and be like, that isn't right. Like, that's not what you think. That's what you were taught to think.
Mhm.
And it's strange. I don't think people understand that either, is like the reprogramming process.
Mhm.
You really have to be disciplined with yourself. And I guess if, there's one takeaway that's positive, it would be self-discipline. To be
Mhm.
able to like
True.
redirect yourself towards the direction that you want to think
Mhm.
and the things that you believe in. That takes a lot of work and effort. Like, it doesn't just happen naturally. Some parts do, but some of it is actual effort.
Well, also life experiences too. When we were told stuff that went against life experience is hard to indoctrinate yourself out of. It really is. There were certain things that I would hear inside, even, my 5-day and 16-day. I'll go, I agree with that, don't agree with that. And even if my life experience wasn't entirely accurate, your life experience informs a lot of how you think and feel.
I think that's why he got the women that he was most
Who were
successful
younger.
with were the young
Or
ones.
younger.
Like the one that he got from the beginning,
Yeah.
like Pam and Karen and Kristen, like all those women were 17, 18.
They were young.
Yeah.
And he knew what he was doing, and they didn't know what he
Exactly.
was doing. They had never seen it. When I was growing up, I had pictures of athletes on my wall, right? Those were my heroes. His heroes were people that did what he did. He even
studied this shit.
admitted in some of his forums, he's like, I was very fascinated when I went to Germany when I was young, like how you could indoctrinate people into that. He wasn't fascinated because he was horrified by it.
He wanted to do it.
He was fascinated because he was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I think. Like if you're consistent with that kind of mind, it seems to me he sees people who are doing, like, anytime you see someone who's doing something better than you, you're inspired by how they do it. I think he was inspired by that kind of thinking.
Yeah, because he liked it.
Right.
That's one of the things that has been like recently more difficult to confront, is just when all of this stuff comes back into the news, definitely feel triggered by it. And we were chatting about this earlier, Sarah, and just like have so many memories of walking around with Keith in Knox Woods and having seemingly casual conversation where I was just like disclosing so much information about myself. And I like, when I think about that now, I feel really like vulnerable. Like, wow, I was really in a place where I was, giving these people information and information that they were then, in turn using against me. But I think that's a scary thought, is like, wow, I was really with somebody who is a devil, like a truly demonic human being. That is why they have a 120-year sentence for that very reason. And that I was so trusting of that person for a certain time. I mean,
Also,
I always felt uncomfortable about
me too.
him.
Always.
That is the weird part.
Always.
And I thought it was because he was a superior and that I felt like kind of intimidated by him, but I never felt relaxed. Anytime he would touch me, my goosebumps would come up. I would always kind of feel a little frozen, and I was like, what is wrong with you? And I gotta get punished. I get punished for not being comfortable around him.
Yeah.
And
which is why he needed the edification that he did. And if he wasn't able to get the information out of you, he had other people that could get it.
Well, that's the other
that
thing.
you genuinely trusted.
I was just thinking about that the other day. You guys remember sitting in a forum or something where he was talking and you're like, wow, I feel like he's speaking directly to something I'm struggling with. And that's because he was. I also had the same thing. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I felt like nervous around him like you would a celebrity, and that I have nothing to really contribute. And people were giving me shit. People were always like, why don't you spend more time with Keith? Like, you're a high rank. Why don't you ask him to go for a walk? I'm like,
I didn't want to.
But remember, the other rule was never ask Keith something that you can ask other people. You don't want to waste his time.
Yeah.
Remember that?
That was another rule.
Yeah. So I was like, but I have nothing to ask him. I don't know what to ask him.
That's how I felt.
Also, I never felt he really resolved anything. So
he just made you feel like shit about yourself.
Well, I just wasn't that interested in him as much as I was what the company was theoretically doing.
That is something that's also difficult
Yeah.
for people to understand because they're like, well, weren't you into him? And I'm like, no, we were made to idolize him. I didn't even join ESP because I gave a shit about Keith Raniere. I mean, whatsoever. I thought, based on the pitch that Sarah and Mark gave, that I thought was actually really exceptional, that I was going to be joining a program where I was going to be able to get rid of my fears and then execute my goals.
Yes.
And I was like, raise my hand because I wanted that so
Mhm.
badly at the time.
Mhm.
And it really had nothing to do with Keith. And it wasn't until even when I went to Albany and they're like, oh, we're going to go to volleyball and you're going to meet Keith. I was like, okay. I mean, I'm 19 years old. Like, why do I care about that? And I was unimpressed
Mhm.
when I first met him. And then it took 5 years of grooming and indoctrination for me to get to the point where I was idolizing this person who I also felt really uncomfortable around, and then was told that that was also my fault. So it's a weird process that they took people through.
And also probably why you understand, I'm guessing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, why there's a few people, we don't have to name them, but a few people that are holding on tight and still believe that he's innocent and that he's a good person. And people are like, well, how can they be so stupid? And I'm like, actually, when I look at them, I go, I understand because I had that perspective at a certain point where the world was against Keith and us as a company. And I'm like, well, they just don't understand. They don't understand. And so now that they're there, they've just doubled, tripled down on, they don't understand. The world doesn't understand. It must be prosecutorial misconduct.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a little less sympathetic to that because,
No,
in order to maintain their perspective, they have to insult everyone's intelligence and deny victimhood as
And
in reality. And they basically lie about other people and slander their character while pretending to be morally superior to them.
Including us, obviously, India.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and to me, I won't acquiesce to a model of the world where flat earthers have a podium to speak from. I think it's absurd.
No, I don't agree with it either. But I feel like I'm sort of like in the middle there because I feel like you too, Sarah, where I completely understand their perspective because I was there too, very much. But at the same time, I'm like, how at this stage? Like,
you know why? Because they're not looking at the data. They refuse to.
No, of course
they
not.
refuse
they
to.
will not read transcript. They will not look at any of the information that's out there because it's all fake news in their mind. And it really just makes me sad because actually really makes me hate Keith even more so because he still has control and is dictating a lot of their choices and they think that they're free agents and they're not.
Right.
And they're insulted by any of us who are speaking out to even indicate that they're not making free choices or that they're under influence or anything like that.
That's a little scary to me to think that there's still like a group of them that are really supportive of each other, really supportive of Keith and his viewpoints. And that's a little dangerous in my mind that is still existing and actually makes me feel afraid sometimes.
Me too.
And I don't like to walk around feeling afraid, but I do. And sometimes I'm looking over my shoulder a little bit more than I would like to, but I also don't like to think that those people are going to act violently against me because I feel like I've been very fair about the way that I've spoke about them in the hopes that maybe it would reach them. But,
well, they are being violent towards you.
Yeah.
Well,
pretending to stand for something.
But they won't hurt. They wouldn't hurt any. Well, that's a nonviolent organization, right? So they can't.
Apparently so. But it still feels freaky to think that someone would be that supportive of someone who is so blatantly disregarding of human beings, including them. Keith doesn't give a shit about any of them.
No,
he doesn't.
No, he loves that he can make them dance.
Totally. And he loves that they're probably still doing check-ins and that they're probably still doing their persistencies and whatnot because it means he still has control over them and they think that they're self-actualized.
How do you feel about, while we're talking today, by the way, how do you feel about the fact that Allison is no longer under his spell, apparently, according to her words?
Yeah, I actually, when I read her apology,
Okay to talk about it?
I asked.
Okay.
Didn't ask permission, but I did ask her lawyer. So.
Okay, great.
But I feel really happy, actually, that she's been able to denounce him if what she's saying is genuine.
Correct.
Based on her apology, it really actually felt like her to me.
Mhm.
It felt like her pre-cult self. Like it was a really kind of simple and basic apology, but it seemed heartfelt. Like she has
Mhm.
seen the truth about who Keith is. And that is what I prayed for a lot. Like,
Mhm.
not that I ever wanted to have a relationship with her again,
Mhm.
but that she would see the truth and be free of that,
Yep.
of him. And it seems like she has. And I know that that's a really painful road because I know what it was like for myself. And there are many dark, dark days where
For
I had
sure.
to confront certain decisions that I made, certain people that have influenced me, certain people that I affected. And that's a lot. It takes a lot of balls to
Mhm.
like go there. And you guys know this very well,
Mhm.
that there's certain times where you're like, I don't know if I can live with myself.
Mhm.
Like this just felt so awful at times.
Mhm.
And so I didn't know if Allison was going to be able to do that on her own. So I didn't like hold my breath, but I did hope that she would be able to.
Well, she had help,
And
right? Her family was there.
She
right?
she did have help,
Yeah.
but I had seen her towards the end, and she was really, really digging her heels in. Like she wouldn't let her mom or her brother or anybody influence her. So
Really?
the fact that she had to be with them under house arrest is probably the biggest gift that she got. And she said that in her apology. She said that she was really grateful that she had her family to
Mhm.
support her through this. And she was also really grateful for all the people that had spoken out, even though she had felt angry at times. She realized that what they had done is actually real love.
Oh, wow.
Good for her.
That's nice.
Yeah. And I thought that was a big statement for her to
Mhm.
say,
Mhm.
given where she started. And I don't think that she is maybe at the same rate of healing as maybe someone like you or me or Nippy is,
Mhm.
but to go from where she is to where she has gotten is a tremendous
Huge.
That's the hardest part.
amount of growth. Yeah,
Mhm.
the hardest part. So I do feel hopeful for her future, but she is not someone who I ever intend to relate with again because
Mhm.
I just don't need that at all in my life.
I'm sure. I told somebody today who asked me that question, and I'm sure it'll come up again when Lauren is sentenced, which is more,
Mhm.
going to be a bigger deal for me than this, than yesterday was. But I said that I wouldn't mind. I'm just like, I like closure, I don't like
Me too.
ruptures. And I don't necessarily want a friendship, but I would like to see her and even to hear that apology to my face, or just to kind of recap some things. I don't know. I feel that way about Lauren too, actually.
I feel
Yeah.
differently about Lauren
Mhm.
than I do about Allison. I feel differently about all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? And Keith was a really different situation for me where I felt like his sentencing, it was really important for me to just say what I needed to say
Mhm.
and confront him directly. Whereas I feel like I've had a certain amount of closure with Allison because of all the other things that I've gotten to do in
Mhm.
these last couple of years. And it was different. It was like I knew that there was nothing that I was going to say that was going to affect Keith because
Mhm.
he has no empathy. So
Right.
it was just my opportunity to get it all out and be like, this is what you fucking did. So
Hmm.
here.
Mhm.
Right.
But
How'd that feel, by the
and
way?
no, scary as shit. I was shaking so bad. I
What was
like,
he like?
I had,
What do you look
he was
like?
like, oh, he was this innocent little
Yeah,
lamb, like
yeah.
sitting up there with his lawyer. And I was like, you are such a fucking liar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
it's his soft
and
voice, like his
yeah,
yeah.
it was
Understand.
repulsive.
Mhm.
And then he has the
Understand.
audacity to call us all liars after we, even after your video,
Mhm.
after all of our victim impact statements. He was like, sit back with his little protector there and called us all liars. So clearly it didn't affect him at all.
Mhm.
And I didn't expect that from Allison, but I was pleasantly surprised that it had changed for her. And then I realized I don't need to be there to address her
Mhm.
because she already knows.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like she has suffered and she will continue to suffer with her 3-year sentence and then 3 years of parole or whatever she's given. And she has a lot of opportunity to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel good
So-
about it? I mean, good is a weird word. Like, do you feel like it's
Yeah,
fair?
I feel like it's fair because I really trust our judge. And I
So do
think
I.
that he
Yeah,
has
he's
been
pretty amazing.
incredibly fair throughout all of this and that he set a really good standard
He
by
really
giving
did.
Keith 120 years
Mhm.
because Keith is the real problem.
Yeah.
Right.
And
No,
we
yeah.
all know this.
Right.
Allison
Everybody
didn't
else
sign
is
up for this.
collateral damage from this.
Right.
Mhm.
She did not sign up to be used and abused and tortured and have her life ruined. That's all Keith.
Yeah.
And I know that. And so even though she committed crimes, I do think it's fair because she did commit crimes that really did hurt people.
Yep.
We got to set a precedent.
Yeah,
Yeah, you do.
And,
No, you
and
run
it's
the red
about
light.
No tolerance for abuse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You run the red light.
You pay the fine.
It doesn't feel good. Do you think she deserves more time than Bill Cosby?
No.
It's crazy.
How do you feel?
Deserves
Isn't
more
that crazy
How
that
nuts is
happened
that?
on the same day?
Appalled.
How nuts is that? On the same fucking day, he gets let
No,
loose.
that was
Like,
so disturbing.
and the inconsistencies of that just to me blow my mind.
I have noticed there is like generally online that people are kind of like WTF about it, but I don't think they understand like coercive control or indoctrination. And I believe the judge does, and I totally trust him.
Totally.
I do too.
Honestly,
And
his language reflected
Did you
that.
read his memorandum?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, part of it.
Yeah.
I read it too last night. That was hard to
Mhm.
read.
Yeah.
But it was so clear. And it actually gave me a lot of validation because I was like, wow, this is how I see it now. This is not how I used to see things 3 years ago, but I see it as clear as his writing. And so I was like, thank God, yay, victory for us.
Mhm.
But also, it was really disturbing because it reminded me that we're all connected in different ways to these sentencings, to Keith and to Allison, and whoever's going to come forward next, whether it's Lauren, Nancy, and Kathy. We're all connected to that, and that's a lot to take in and to process, and to know that because of what everyone did at different stages, it has affected
That
these people
moment
for the rest of their
Oh,
lives.
absolutely. I felt that when I saw her coming out with the paparazzi swarming her, and I just broke down in tears because I was like,
Me too.
I was at her first gymnast training, like I saw her get swept up and go on the plane and go meet Keith right after that.
And
Like,
targeted, really. That's what it was.
Targeted.
She was targeted.
But have you seen the vow scene where she meets Keith?
I have not, but
You
I've
heard
seen
about it?
clips of that part.
Okay.
Yeah, and I heard about that, and it is scary to see that because that's kind of the way she looked when she was around him, where she was really just under a spell. And I think a lot of people think that thing that just happens overnight. It doesn't really happen overnight. It's a slower drip. It's a process.
But he got her very quickly. And that's like, I remember saying to Nippy, if I had seen what he did to her, like if I'd been in Albany when she got hooked, I would have been like, that's so gross. You don't talk to people. Like he just like with his eyes, like pierced her soul. And she was like, and it was awful to watch. And it's like, they made skits about it on Saturday Night Live. You know what I mean? Like this has become a pop culture phenomenon, this whole thing. And that moment, I could see how, it made me really angry. It made me so angry. And to know that that was done to you. And I wish that, we were all so siloed. We're all so separate from what was actually going
and we
on.
weren't allowed to talk about what was really going on.
No.
You know that.
And I couldn't have told you either. I couldn't have told you because I would have been breaking rank to say anything that I was upset with.
Right. Or anything negative because you weren't allowed to criticize anyone.
No.
That was also.
That was speaking dishonorably.
Strategic rules.
To protect Keith.
So no, I don't feel good about it,
Right.
but I do feel affirmed to know that that even when I have had and continue to have challenging days, it's not for nothing. Like it actually has a reason. And when I was reading his memorandum, I'm like, fuck, it was really, really gnarly. Like, and I know too, Sarah, and the fact that you were able to see it when you did and speak about it even before anyone else was speaking about it is huge, huge. And I don't think people understand like the gravity of that. It makes me want to cry because it is so hard to go against programming like that. Additionally, with collateral in place that will damage the people that you love most. And if you're an empathetic person, like that is worse than chains because it's, taking the things that you love the most and tarnishing them. So I have enormous amount of respect for what you did and what everybody did who left before me and after, because everyone had to take enormous risks.
Yeah. Well, we all did in different ways and for the responsibility we had with the roles we had in the organization. But, there was a moment when we knew we had to get out, but we didn't know we were going to go public or try to take it down or whatever. And one of the reasons we did is we put together very quickly through everyone's different intel that, there were a lot of slaves And for sure, we knew that you were under Alice. Like, as soon as we pieced together what it was, we're like, okay, for sure, India is under Allison, and we put it all together. I'm like, and Nippy and I talked about it with everyone who's leaving. Like, we can't leave them there. We have to free them. But I just want to say, like, it feels like there was a moment where people were saying things like, this person took down Nexium, that person took down Nexium. I feel particularly uncomfortable when people say that about me because I was the face of it at the beginning. But your mom. No,
But I don't
me
see
neither.
it like that
No,
either.
Mark and Bonnie.
I see it
Yeah.
as
It was a team.
It was a whole team. Yeah.
It was a team, but it was a team of like multiple
Yes.
layers. And like you said, everyone had a specific role and had to participate in the way that they did in order to effectively change it. So I feel like even for me, my role was I stayed in really long compared to a lot of other people, but I also got a shit ton of information from being on the inside that was actually really helpful to the FBI when I was working with them for 9 months, because I saw it crumbling at the very end and seeing what everyone was doing and all of the crimes that they were committing at the tail end to try and cover things up. I thought were kind of normal because I had normalized a lot of that behavior. So by the time I'm, out and ready to talk to the FBI, I'm saying things kind of like haphazardly. And they're like, what?
You provided,
Wait a minute.
provided proof about things that I only had heard. When I first went to them, I was like, this is what I think is going on. I mean, I give them my computer, I give them my phone. I said, take whatever you need. Here's specific text messages I think that are helpful. But I didn't have a lot of proof yet. But when they investigated, they found the proof.
I knew a lot of that stuff because I was there. And for some reason, they called me the Vault because everyone wanted to tell me their secrets, like Nikki Klein and Allison, and even some things Keith told me that were unusual. I guess people just thought I was, dumb and I was just going to take it in one ear and leave it out the other. But I was just making people feel comfortable. So they would share with me. And some of those things I didn't want to remember. And some of those things I did. And those were things that I ended up sharing with the FBI. And it did support everything that everyone who had already come out.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family. But everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like, I'm in Vancouver right now, and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. Hashtag cold pools, hashtag crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me, and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it, and I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty.
Right.
That's that. So it was like everybody needed each other. And that's why I also feel uncomfortable with that topic of like, oh, there's, the vow camp and the seduce camp. I'm like, who the fuck cares?
I'm so glad you
Like,
said that.
everyone was there for the same
Image
goal.
wars.
Like, we are talking about Keith Raniere here, the fucking predator Keith Raniere. The reason why we're all doing this is not for our own self, to rebrand ourselves or whatever. It's because we had an obligation to do this in order for our own healing and also to share the truth. Because you can't not, like, once you know, you can't pretend
And
that you don't know. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to just like run away to the mountains and change my name and not have to deal with any of this shit. And then I realized if I don't deal with this, this is going to
that's why most people actually, you probably know this from your self-education, but most people join another group because they cult hop. They don't heal and they just join another one. So I'm glad you did that work.
I mean, yeah, and I'm still doing it, and I know you are too. And I think it takes like I said, a lot of discipline, but I have always wanted to stay focused on like what the real goal was. And the goal is to expose Keith Raniere and for people to understand coercion and to make this conversation about cults and sexual abuse more mainstream so that less people feel afraid to talk about it.
Turn your experience into content.
Exactly. And that is what I feel like I've been able to do. And I want to move through it and out towards the other side to be able to do more of what I am passionate about. But it is a process. And so like sometimes people will be like, oh, why are they still talking about NXIVM? We're not still just sitting around talking about NXIVM. Like none of us really just want to sit around and talk about NXIVM. We're doing this for a purpose. And the purpose is to move on and move forward and
not just
get clarity.
And not just like when I hear people on the other side going, oh, they're, just doing it for the book deal. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Do you know how stressful it is to write a book?
Yeah, it was really stressful. And it's not like you're rolling in dough when you write a book. Like the literary world is really archaic. It is not.
My favorite line is, and I got this from Jess, our producer, just waiting for that whistleblower money to come rolling in, just waiting for it. Right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like that.
No, and I want to read something, and Nippy's going to make fun of me, but I wrote this in August 30th of 2017. That's the year we left, right? 2017, right, babe?
Yep.
So I used to journal. I had a lot of dreams about everyone I left behind, and including you, India. And I wrote this about you when, oh God, I'm going to cry, when you were still in. Just August 30th. Just had the most beautiful dream about India. Not sure where I was, but we were outside eating dinner with friends, and I saw her coming towards us on a field. Her hair down, flowered dress and boots, ethereal and casual, like a Free People print ad. She looked so full and healthy. I almost didn't recognize her as she passed me. I knew we weren't allowed to talk, but I needed to make contact, so I reached out my hand, and she took it reluctantly. But as soon as we were touching, I pulled her close, and we embraced. It was so, I have no words, surreal. Her body was hard, stiff like a mannequin, hardened with pain. But she softened in my arms, and we were both crying so deeply we couldn't let go. And I remember thinking, am I wearing earplugs? Because I couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched tone. And time stood still, and all I could do was feel the love and hurt flow between us, and the intensity of the emotion and the physical contact. I can't read my own writing. The physical contact from the past 16 months. Oh, it must have been the year after. It pulled me from slumber and back to reality. The tether was so strong, I begged to go back to dreamland to take me back. I had so many questions for her, so much to say. I wasn't done. Now I'm writing from my living room. They're watching Transformers. India is in Malibu with her mother. She is safe. We are out, but we're not yet healed. So that was, I guess, the year I knew you were out, but we hadn't talked yet. And I just love to see you right now because you just look so healthy and so back to you. And it makes me really happy.
Thank you. I feel really, really lucky.
Yes.
We're all lucky.
Yeah, we're all really lucky.
With how it went down. And, was I watching Transformers?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it was.
Because I don't remember that.
Troy was watching Transformers.
Okay.
That's a very beautiful and accurate symbol.
Yeah. I think so too.
It's so weird to try to explain to people what it feels like to like be living a double life that you can't really reconcile because you can't be honest about your experience. And that's really how I felt in the last couple of years, specifically in DOS. And I did feel very fractured when I was in ESP as a coach as well, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and really feeling lost.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more so in DOS because of all the secrecy. Mm-hmm. And then all of the compounding collateral and whatnot, to the point where it's like, you almost have to convince yourself that the collateral doesn't exist
Mhm.
so that you can function.
Mhm.
You can't think about it at the same time and do your life. So that was one of the things that took so long to admit to myself, that I was really afraid of the collateral. I was curious if that happened to you, if like feeling like your emotions were catching up with what you were starting to understand about what had happened.
Oh, you mean
Like
since
it
being
wasn't
out?
always in conjunction. Yeah, since being out. You would have a realization about what had happened, or like you would kind of understand the reality versus what you were taught to think. And then your emotions would come later and you would be like either crying or having a meltdown. And you're like, oh my God, this now makes sense, because like I had to have them both happen. I couldn't just intellectualize it. I had to like feel it again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think because we were so caught, at least for me, I felt so cut off from my feelings in general.
Me too.
Right? Actually, one of my big kind of ahas, I don't know if I've talked about it here, or I'm sure where I did, but look, Nippy and I knew we were out. This is early days, like weeks after. And Nippy made a comment like, you know, I just want to hike and like do normal things with my family. Like, what a relief we don't have to go to all these intensives kind of thing. And I said,
I know.
You know, and I was just like, I'm so happy. And he goes, yeah, see, now you're happy. And he made it kind of in a jokey way, like, you know, you're happy because your worlds are aligned. Like it's a control strategy. Like you're just getting what you want. As if, and I go, no, actually, Nippy, that's something that makes me happy. And that's okay.
Whoa, did you just throw me on the bus?
No, I'm not throwing you under the bus. I was talking about that moment when we realized that we'd actually been taught that feeling happy wasn't okay. Because feeling happy, right, just meant that your, quote, worlds were aligned, which means you controlled things insofar as that you got what you wanted. And that's not good, because it means it's covering up a deficiency. Like, how fucked is that?
It's so fucked up. I know. I had so many moments after I had left in the beginning that were those types of realizations, where I remember the first. So I was working really, really hard when I was in New York City, because I just didn't want to have to deal with my life falling apart all around me.
Mm-hmm.
So I would work like 14-hour days. And I had just started dating Patrick, and he decided that he was going to take me on a trip to Connecticut, like for the weekend, like a normal person would. Like the normal person would stop working and then go away for the weekend.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do that. And he was like, well, why not? What else do you have to do? I was like, I just couldn't figure out why I felt like I wasn't allowed to just enjoy my life and take off. And so he was like, okay, well, let's try. So we go up to the beach, and I start having a panic attack on the sofa when he was cooking in the kitchen, and I was lying down, you know, trying to relax.
Mm-hmm.
And I start having a panic attack, and he's like, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know what's happening to me, but I can't breathe. Like I'm struggling to breathe, and I feel like I'm not allowed to do this. And
wow.
And he was like, what, like, what are you not allowed to do? Like he couldn't get it, but it was so clear to me, but I also couldn't communicate what I was struggling with. So I just sort of was like, let me just breathe this out, and I'll let you know like what comes up, if anything comes up. And he came back into the room after I had sort of like calmed myself down, and he said, you know what? When I'm done with you, you're going to know how to chill. And I was like,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you something.
I felt so far from that. I felt so far from being able to do that. I mean, I still struggle with it, but not to that extent.
That's what I was about to say. Nippy's still trying to get me to sit still, because it's, you know, it's just hard. It's hard. I totally get that. I take a lot of CBD to like chill the F out, because otherwise, I mean, if you really think about what's happened to us.
CBD's bullshit. Doesn't work.
It's not true. This is an ongoing debate between us.
Some people are sensitive to it. It doesn't help me as much. Long baths, and I prefer marijuana, to be honest. But
we do it all.
Yep.
Especially long baths.
That's my lane.
Long baths, mushrooms really help. There's a lot of really like good tools that if you need to kind of crack into your emotions, sometimes you need a little help. You can't always just jump from numb to normal.
Mm-hmm. I think microdosing mushrooms is actually really good for anxiety.
I do
Little
too.
plug for that.
Working out.
Nippy loves to work out.
Working out. Yeah, I actually started to train aggressively.
You're doing kickboxing, right?
Boxing and personal training. So like a lot of weightlifting and things like that. Because I just needed it. I needed to one, rebuild my strength, and also just learn to trust my body again and feel good about my body and have the body that I wanted, which was a muscular, lean body. And So I actually like myself a lot more, but that's because I prioritize what I
Yeah.
find attractive.
Yeah, not what somebody else wants. Well,
Yeah, not what someone else wants.
Well, Nippy used to say that all the women around Keith had a, what did you call it? The Mick Jagger body?
Yeah, they all look like Mick Jagger.
Yeah, and like emaciated. And
Yeah.
Like the skinny legs,
Yeah.
the big bobble head, the hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like 70s rock
Oh,
stars.
creepy.
Rod Stewart and Mick Jagger.
Or
Little did you know.
Tell me I'm wrong. I mean, I don't, you know.
what were
You're
you?
not. You're right.
Yeah, I remember we were playing basketball at V Week, and I think you were there, India, and it was like a real competitive game. I don't know if you remember this, and you were like, Jesus, you guys go hard. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
I don't know what it was in relation. Oh, it was in working out hard.
Well, we also had a therapist that taught
It's
us
non sequitur. Don't worry about it.
that when you're stressed out or you're dealing with anxiety or depression, as we all have been, I'm sure in different ways, you have to either sweat it out or cry it out. Otherwise, those stress hormones really can mess with you.
Yeah.
Totally. That's why I, even before sometimes I do work or podcasts or anything, I make sure that I exercise.
Yeah.
I just need it. And
Fucks with your sleep.
Just
too.
found it. It does.
I actually did a kickboxing thing this morning in your honor.
Oh,
yeah.
thanks.
I was like, this is for India. I gotta do more of
Thank
this.
you. I love my boxing. It has taught me so much. And sometimes you really just need to punch the shit out of something when you can't verbally communicate why you're so upset. So sometimes my boxing coach, he'll see me and I'll just be like, just hitting. And he's like, I don't want to know who you're imagining. I'm like, no, you don't.
But there's a great documentary you can watch if you like to
Yeah.
know the
If you're
details.
interested.
Where are you living?
But
Are you in LA, India?
I am.
How is it out there?
You know, it's good. It was definitely weird during the pandemic, and we took off and did some road tripping just to when our lease was up on our last place, and then we came back to Los Angeles just in April. So
cool.
It's been good, but it's definitely a little behind. And I actually really enjoyed our time in the South because it kind of felt more normal.
Yeah, Atlanta's wide open right now.
Yeah, and so I have varying opinions of.
We'll have to do a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a totally different.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
There's a lot there.
It is parallel because if our wisdom is worth what we think it is, we're sensitive to indoctrinations, right? And propaganda, and that's pretty much all we're getting right now. You know, you
honestly, it's hard.
Difficult.
It's really hard for me to know what's what.
It really is.
What
You turn on Fox News, it's how bad the Democrats are. You turn on CNN, it's how bad the Republicans are, and no one's talking about ideas. They politicized.
No.
You know, medicine. It's a binary world that we have to live in, and people are always eliciting which side you're on, and it's just. I mean, we've been here before,
we have been here before, and I was with someone recently who was like, "What is with Americans and being so involved in everybody else's business?" And I'm like, I don't know, man. I was like, you're right. And he's from Mexico.
Yeah.
And he was like, what about like your family and your job and like just kind of like doing normal person things? And I'm like, that's a really good point, because I do think that we're so focused on each other and like correcting each other's behavior that you forget about just the fundamental basic parts of living and how that it's just not necessary to be.
People feel emboldened.
Involved.
Yeah. They feel emboldened to figure out how you think and then persecute you for not thinking the way they do.
I like to seek
familiar.
out. I know, right? It's super actually triggering some of the parallels. But before we go on a political tangent,
I'm done.
Okay. No, we're good.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask India, because I know we're running out of time. What, like, is there anything that you wanted to ask us that you never got to know, or anything that you were curious about? We don't normally let our guests ask questions, but you get to.
What have been some of the other realizations that you had when you left that were kind of like paradigm shifting? Because I know for me, some people have asked in interviews, like, what was your one aha moment? I'm like, there was no one aha moment.
A whole bunch.
There's been layer after layer after layer of ahas. And so I feel like those are really important in people's healing and recovery. So I was curious about like some of the more major ones for you that were kind of breakthroughs.
And with my first therapist that I spoke to, who wasn't a cult expert, and so I kind of had to like go over with him the first few modules, which were like the foundation of everything we learned after that. because I think at the time I was dealing with something that I couldn't explain to him without explaining to him the concept of at cause and some of the key principles that were so foundational. And so when I was teaching it to him, I was explaining to him something about needs and how we learned right at the beginning that we only have needs that are survival based, really. Remember, they asked us to write a list of all your needs, and we would put all our needs, and then most of us included things like love and health and security and family and comfort and connection and community, or all these things, right? And basically, if you listened and paid attention and were a good student, you agreed and admitted to really we only need survival, Maslow's hierarchy, food, shelter, air, whatever. Yeah. And how when I expressed something that I felt like I needed, I felt like in my life, I didn't know how to express those things or whatever. And my therapist, it was kind of great that he wasn't a cult expert, because he was genuinely like, but those are, okay, there's needs to survive, but what about needs to thrive? And I was like, oh, totally. Like we were made to think we didn't need connection. We don't need support. Like, Of course I don't need it to breathe, but like for a full, rich life, I want those things.
To feel guilty.
Yeah, and I feel guilty about wanting that. But I feel guilty about wanting a certain type of connection or support, or like somehow something's wrong with me that I'm looking for. Those are normal things. And then I thought,
totally felt
that. Isn't that crazy? And like I'll think, and then I actually referenced all the women that had been there and been there for so long. I don't even mention their names, you know who they are, but moved there with him and like part of the harem or group, whatever you want to call it. And they were so miserable.
They're vapid too.
They're vapid, and like they gave up all their hopes and dreams to like serve him, essentially. And remember,
and we're noble about it.
Yeah. Didn't Lauren say to you once? You're like, doesn't she say this is what growth looks like, Nippy?
Well, so when I knew I was out, I went up to volleyball to take the temperature and see what I could see. And she was asking me about why Mark had left. And I'd already had a conversation with Mark, and I was out, and I just wanted to see what was going on.
She was seeing how much Lauren would lie. He was seeing how much Lauren would lie to her.
I said, what do you think? She got a conversation, and she was basically saying, and I think this is what she was indoctrinated to believe, right? So it's not like, it's not a persecution of Lauren, in any sense.
We know that. That's the precursor to all of this.
Because I think, I liked Lauren and like her, like, my relationship with her, but this chasm, obviously. And she was like, well, Mark was asking questions about why the women are so miserable looking and why they're so thin and why they're so, Mark was going back and forth. So you need to understand, when we would go back and forth, we felt like we were coming to a funeral every time we went to Albany. Like, it was our joke. We're like, we're going to a wake, and sometimes we were, ironically. And Lauren was like, I told him that's what growth looks like. You come to Albany, it's not the best place in the world. You're in your shit and your growth. And that's when I just said, no, in my head. I was like, that's not what growth looks like. The best years of my life, I was growing, before that. Yeah. Like, of course, it's going to be hard. It's supposed to be hard when you're trying to achieve something and you grow your character and all those things. But you're not miserable when you're doing it. You're not in your shit when you're doing it, right? And that belief was perpetrated throughout mostly Albany. I felt closer to Keith. It was like, I felt like when you went to Mexico, it was a party. When you came to Vancouver, it was a party. Like,
but we were being superficial.
But the centers took on the personality of the leadership, and people, weren't that morose and they weren't that dark. You can go to LA and you have fun, and people go, oh, this is great. I'm getting my goals, which is why I love doing the goals lab, because that felt like you're actually doing something. And that to me,
the rest was just spinning your wheels.
Right. And that to me, when I got out too, was like, that was one of the things I didn't relate to, because I didn't like it, which is why I didn't do a lot of the things. There's certain things that I just wasn't susceptible to, and I wasn't targeted for, right? As a male in the organization.
I think you have a chaps my ass about that, don't you?
What?
Just some of the things that they asked you to do, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, stop doing that. You chaps my ass when you put me on the spot.
You're not allowed to do chaps your ass about me. You can only do chaps my ass about Nexium.
Stop chapping my ass.
You're his wife. You're going to chap his ass.
I chap his ass on a daily basis.
I mean, listen, here's a couple things. If you don't make me wait and you don't add 20 things before you get out the door,
that's just who I am.
Well,
you gotta
it's not
accept
who
me.
you are.
Yeah, it's
same thing with Lauren. You don't go to Albany. It's not in your shit. It's not who you are. You don't have to be that way. Just twist it on.
Did we get your chaps my ass? Did we cover them all?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, no. There was another one that I thought of. The amount of times that I was delayed in the Chicago airport chaps my ass, because There is no simple way to get to Albany. And you guys, anyone knows this. There's no
No.
fucking direct flight.
No.
You literally have to go to the worst airports in winter to get stalled. And I was probably
God.
3
That's
times
hilarious.
in freaky motels in Detroit because United Airlines put me there while I waited out a snowstorm. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, why? What? And that was to get to an intensive.
So all
And also, United would always lose your bags.
United, dude.
I would always.
Are we going to get sued? Can we
No,
check our
no,
lawyers
sorry.
here?
In my opinion, United always lose my. I would always travel with a whole set of clothes for the next day when I flew United because I always knew I wouldn't get my bag.
So here's what I did, India. I would do Vancouver, O'Hare, either Albany or Kennedy.
Wait, and how
right?
well did you know that Chicago airport? By the
Oh.
way, I knew
Very
I knew
well.
where the salad bar
I would
was.
fantasize about the light that I would walk
Did you
down
know
that
it like the back of
tunnel.
your hand,
Like
Sarah?
the back of my hand,
my
Vivi.
God,
I really
so
did. It was so
amazing.
crazy.
So I started going through Milwaukee's airport.
I did Washington Dulles. Not great.
No.
Oh my god,
But yeah, so that chapped my ass.
that's a good one.
It also,
That is a good one.
So,
That is a good one.
I think.
credit card debt also chapped my ass.
Mhm.
But that's a whole other subject.
Yeah, it's that chaps my ass too. And the credit card wouldn't give me my money back even after I said that this is fraudulent. And then they said, well, actually, that reminds me, I got to follow up with them because they said when criminal charges are placed,
Oh my
then we'll get.
God.
I gotta call.
That's
I gotta
right.
call Visa.
Just
Be
stop
like,
and be like, listen,
bitches, I
look at
want my
this.
money back. This isn't legit.
120,
years.
motherfucker.
Yeah, actually, that's another weird thing is like when you have to kind of explain to people where you were the past 7 years of your life.
Yeah.
And that also chaps my ass because sometimes when you're talking to like either a government facility, like for instance, taxes, and they're like, so what was going on between 2000 and blah, blah, and 2000? And I'm like, well, a little bit of a strange situation, but I wasn't making any money for a really long time because I was in a cult.
Are you in front
they're
of your
like-
computer? Can you Google Keith Raniere?
Right.
Say
And
no
they're
more.
like, okay. And they like don't really want to ask any more questions,
Right.
but they're also intrigued and kind of confused. And I'm like, I have an explanation for anything. I just don't know how much you want to know.
It's a really interesting story, I find. Well, I'm sure that most people you meet probably know your story at this point, but every now and then meeting somebody at a dinner party who doesn't know anything about it.
No, not most.
Yeah.
I love it when people don't know
Yeah.
anything about me. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I prefer it that way.
Yeah.
But when they start asking questions, you kind of have to tell them a little bit. And then, of course, it ends up like dominating the conversation because everybody wants to know the details of, the sex cult,
Right.
which I'm sure that you also hate as much as I do, that name.
I do.
Yeah.
I hate it when it's called a sex cult. And
so-
I hate it when they
so
use it
aggravating.
in the headlines
Yeah.
of things because I'm like, that's not really what this was.
No.
I get it that it was in its core.
Yeah.
I mean, when you strip it down,
Right.
it was a
But not
coercive,
for so many of us.
sex ring,
Yeah.
but not for a lot of people.
Yeah. And
And so I feel like that's really unfair.
Yeah.
But I also understand why the media
Yeah.
uses it. It's sensational, it gets attention, but it's annoying.
Well,
Absolutely.
and that's where I think all of us can come together when it gets the attention to be responsible with the platform and steer it in the right direction.
Yeah, keep the focus on track.
Yeah.
Get it away from the sensational stuff and, promoting abusers like Keith Raniere and even some of his loyalists who are really vocal and supportive. Like don't focus on them. Focus on the survivors.
I
Focus
agree.
on the people
I agree.
who want to make change and people who are willing to be honest about a very complicated situation because then other people can listen, they can learn, and they can avoid it.
Mhm.
Right.
And I feel like we have a superpower now.
We do.
because
Mhm.
we've been able to see it from the inside out.
And we can also be an inspiration for other people who are in the middle of their own crisis and trying to summon up the courage to leave or speak out. And do you have any advice for people from going through what you've gone through? Like what you'd say to people who might be unsure if they should do what you've done or to leave or any advice?
Oh, I mean, I think that it's really about learning to listen to yourself
Mhm.
again
Mhm.
and learning to trust your gut and your instincts because I don't think that going public is necessarily the route for everyone to heal. I actually think that it can be very re-traumatizing. And so I wouldn't necessarily suggest that unless you are absolutely ready. For my case, I didn't have the option to
Mhm.
not be outed.
Right.
So I had to kind
Right.
of deal with what had already happened and figure out how I was going to take my life back in my own hands. and what direction I wanted to guide it in. And I was already out. So if you have your anonymity and that's really important to you, protect that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to speak out and you need to reach somebody who is a responsible and a respectful counsel, there's people out there that are willing to help you legally. So that's one way to go. You don't have to go directly to the media, but although it can be effective, I think primarily you have to just learn to listen to yourself again, because you, as you know, it's so easy to be manipulated and to have yourself to be doing things that are not in your best interest. And I even found that with myself coming out, that I had fallen into a couple traps along the way, even while I was trying to figure out what had happened to me. So you have to just be aware that other people are out there and that you're in a vulnerable place, and that to look for the right support system that helps you heal.
That's good advice.
Well put.
So I don't think it's a blanket statement for everybody.
Right.
I think
No, I agree with you.
in the approach that they take, and everyone has the right to, because they know what they need for their own healing when you tap into that.
Mm-hmm. It also chaps my ass that we weren't allowed to speak and we couldn't be a support system for each other for so long, like until recently.
Oh, that was so hard.
It was really hard. I really wanted to just commiserate and share and hug you and all those things. We weren't allowed to talk until the legal stuff was over. And that was really, really difficult.
That's a real problem for a lot of people that are working, that become cooperating witnesses with the government, or that are going to testify or whatnot. It is really lonely. Like you're in a silo.
Yeah.
And you are not allowed to communicate with anybody again.
Yeah.
And then I remember them telling me, they're like, keep your circle really small. You're not allowed to share anything that you're doing with anybody. I was like, God, I have been here before.
Yeah. It's not a good place for victims.
No, it's not. And I wish to God that there were better programs available, because I really looked for them and there weren't many available at all.
Really?
So I really relied on my family a lot. Yeah. Even just like with therapy and just services provided. I absolutely loved our prosecutors and our team.
Weren't they
I thought
amazing?
that they did an excellent
That's
job.
amazing.
Excellent. But superstars. But I think that there's a real
gap,
lack of therapeutic help and counseling that should be available to people that are in this situation.
We're going to have Moira on our podcast in second season.
Oh, good.
How much do you love
Wonderful.
Moira?
Love her.
I auditioned.
We chat about shoes.
Oh, yeah. Her. When I met her,
so
I was like,
well-dressed.
"Who is this FBI agent who's like head to toe Prada?" That's what
really
I was
hot,
thinking.
Really well dressed.
Which was so ironic that she took Keith down because she was totally his type. That's like, right? Did you think that?
My mom and I would joke about that all the time. We're like, "Ha, stiletto took you out, bitch."
Yes, the poetic justice knows no bounds.
It's great. It's
Oh,
great
man.
to see you smiling.
It's really good.
India.
Yeah, it's really good to see you so happy.
This is really helpful. I was not having a good day. I was crying since last night. So
Oh man,
I really needed this.
At some point, I want to have a conversation with you about what they were saying and how they were just slandering us.
we love to hear about what was happening after we left.
Just because.
You love to hear all the propaganda.
Yeah, it's so funny because we have time to do it quickly?
Nah, well, I don't.
Let me.
All right. Well.
Let me think of one. Well, one, the classic one that Sarah was throwing a big tantrum.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get a spot on the executive board, right? Which I never wanted because that's like the worst job ever.
Dude, I wouldn't have let her be on that. I remember telling Sarah, you don't want
Nippy
that
was a hothead.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I got like a couple texts of people who saw The Seduced. I look like Jack Nicholson from the fucking Shining in that thing when they pause the thing. Nippy, there's a scene where Nippy's a hothead and they slow it down. I got my head down. It looks like I'm fucking Jack Nicholson sticking my head through the door going, "Here's Johnny." The fuck?
That's right. There were many moments that were edited in Seduce where I'm like, oh my God, so embarrassed.
But it
by my
slows it
behavior,
down and like
old
pauses on my head, and I'm like looking down,
you
like
piece of champ. So I'm like, oh my God, kill me now. But
yeah, fuck yeah, I was a hothead. My wife got branded, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah,
what do you think I'm
I
gonna do?
wish I would have had a husband back then.
Jesus.
Yeah, you know though that we planned that, right? Like you've heard that you know that, right? Okay, yeah. That we
and that was really well done.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a person who had left before us who instructed us to leave because of our issues, so that it would be consistent with our behavior. So Nippy Sarah had a tantrum and
Nippy had a blow up.
Nippy had a blow up. We really wanted to go in and I wanted him to flip egg tables.
So here was my
table.
So here's what I wanted to do. Like I did what I did, but I was going to go in. I wanted to flip that table of eggs that they put out every day. But then I thought of Lucy, Revy, and all the people that are going to have to clean it up. And I was like, fuck, I can't do that because they're going to be the ones that have to clean it up. But I had a whole.
Right, and they're not the
No, I was going to knock some speakers over, and I was like, those are fluffies. And like, he's and Damon, they're going to all have to pick up their electronic equipment. So I couldn't be like.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that because I really do think like it's also hard for people to understand that leaving this group also meant leaving a lot of people who were our friends.
Good people.
And that we had, and good people that we had relationships for a long time. Granted, there were plenty of people in Nexium who I
never
want to see again.
In fact, if I do, I'm going to knock them out. I'm just going to keep walking. I'm going to knock them out.
Same. I was like, God, why did I hate you? Because I hated you, and that's okay. And you weren't someone I would choose to be friends with anyway.
Do you know that I had an interaction with Claire that was so awful, and I basically had to get an EM about it. Anytime if you didn't like someone, you had to do an EM about it and get a projection sourcing until you liked them, but it was fake. I tried so hard, but she just, some people.
She was really hard to like.
She's really hard.
Really hard to like.
Yeah.
She's not a human.
No,
being.
she's a mean person.
I never got there.
I tried. She gave me a bottle of electrolytes once. I thought that was sweet, but like after the
that's the kindest thing she ever did.
She's like, yeah, you could have one of my noon bottles.
I feel like we could talk forever.
I know. We should probably wrap up. I'm sorry. It was more than an hour.
Other things? That's fine. I planned for that anyway.
Me too. Listen, I just remembered one more chaps my ass to end on.
Do it.
We were talking about being fractured and like doing how did I get this and get here and what am I doing? I stopped doing stuff but I started to lie about it. Like all the data entry that we were supposed to do and the checking in and like doing planks. And that's the thing, because you were in Albany, people were checking up on you. I was in Vancouver. So I was like, yeah, I'm swimming so that I could take a nap because I wasn't allowed to go dark, right? Like you can't bring your phone in the pool, right? Or I'd be like, I did my.
If you're committed.
I did my 5-hour plank for you, but I didn't do it.
I remember one night I did that too, where you have to like your little white lies here all over the place. Yeah. But I definitely did my fair share of committing and following through. But I remember one night we had to stand at 3 a.m. and get on the phone with the rest of the women in my pod. Mm-hmm. And I was so pissed. I was like, I am not doing this. Mm-hmm. And so I put them on speakerphone, and then I was commiserating with them in our chat about like how awful this penance was while I was lying down in my bed. And I'm thinking like I'm actually feeling really guilty, thinking Allison is going to catch me and like then punish me even more. And I just remember there were so many moments like that where I was just like, I just don't want to do this anymore. But I had to convince myself that, that was
your
my
issue.
Own problem.
Yeah.
It was my issue.
I'm so glad that you woke up and that you're here and and you do look a bit like a Free People ad, like in my dream. Right?
Well, I haven't cut my hair for 2 years, quarantine.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I hope.
Thank you. I got it back.
Yes, that's good.
I'm ragged at a certain point.
And I hope we get to hug for real one day.
Me too.
One day soon. When we're allowed to travel.
Well, we'll be in LA at some point.
Well, let me know. I'm here.
All right.
Don't be a stranger.
Guys.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have another conversation about that because there's some other things I want to ask you as well.
I'm sure. No, there's plenty, and this is really spur of the moment. So I feel like we have to have a part 2 where we actually have.
I want to hash
we can
out
drill
like
each other on questions.
When this thing happened, what they do. I want to have like
right.
So
we have to have like the inside and the outside perspective.
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners are going to love this because they've been asking to have you on as a guest from day one. So thank you.
Hi guys.
Hi guys, here she is.
Thank you.
Mwah. Big hugs to rice and beans.
Soon.
Yeah, awesome, India.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Bye. That was our bonus episode for the summer. We're preparing for season 2.
And we so appreciate everybody reaching out and sharing that they're missing the podcast. We miss it too, although we are enjoying the break. But we are educating ourselves and lining guests up and getting ready for an exciting season 2. So stay tuned. Thank you again, India, for joining us from California.
Enjoy the summer.
Stay safe, everybody.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We're going to be back soon with more episodes of A Little Bit Culty with more experts and survivors, and sometimes experts who are survivors, and some familiar faces from The Vow.
If you got suggestions or questions on upcoming topics, find us on Instagram at A Little Bit Culty.
And for more background on what got me to this point, my memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life, is available on Amazon, Audible, and wherever books are sold.
If you'd like to help us spread the word about A Little Bit Culty podcast, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe.
Like literally take their phone out and press subscribe.
5 stars. That's
5 stars.
5 of them.
We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every major listening app. A Little Bit Culty is executive produced by me, your co-host, Sarah Edmondson, and Anthony Nippy Ames. Associate producer is Jess Tardy. Produced, edited, mixed, and mastered by Citizens of Sound. Our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. Additional original music is composed by Will Rutherford.
We'll be back with more episodes. Until then,
Don't
join
a
a cult.
I'm Sarah Edmondson, and thanks for listening to A Little Bit Culty.
Hey, it's Nick Vial, host of the Vial Files, and I'm here to remind you to check out our show. Do you like reality TV? Are you interested in pop culture? Are you fascinated with relationships? Or are you struggling in your own relationship? Well, there's something for everyone here at the Vial Files. Whether it's Ask Nick on Monday, our reality recap episodes that break down your favorite reality TV and pop culture moments, or our Going Deeper episodes that give you the blockbuster interviews with some of your favorite celebrities out there. Either way, we have something for everyone, so check out the Vial Files wherever you get your podcasts.